Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up, Mr. Dilson. You told me at the beginning of the hearing that the National Guard Quick Reaction Force already existed, but I understand that's not accurate, that the Secretary of Defense ordered the establishment of this National QRF on September 27th of this year. Not only that, he ordered that they be trained for specifically, and I quote, civil disturbance and law enforcement missions, and to be available for immediate nationwide deployment, ready to deploy within 8 hours, 12 hours, and 24 hours notice with weapons. Can you clarify your earlier answer?
Mr. Ranking Member, thank you for the opportunity to clarify the statement from before. The Secretary ordered the establishment of a new unit. You are correct in that. However, it is an old unit that will be repurposed to create that new unit. The National Guard Bureau refers to that as the HERF-DERF, Homeland Response Force and Domestic Response Force. And so we are repurposing something that already exists to create that newly established unit.
Now, the Secretary explicitly directed this QRF to be used for law enforcement. How would that be allowable under Posse Comitatus and the Title X authorities?
Senator, if I may, that is probably in the legal lane, and I have some background on the way in which these forces have been used historically and mustered within the states, having been the General Counsel of the National Guard Bureau. Many states, every state generally, will have an element of their force that they identify to be on a more ready recall notice. And so some states that may be 50 people, some states it's 700 people. Those forces are the ones that will be able to muster to their location quickly. And technically when they come in that status, sir, they would be non-federalized, and therefore the Posse Comitatus Act would not apply to them.
So you're saying that these forces would not be mobilized on a Title X mission?
Senator, what I'm saying is that if needed, the primary usage of these will be domestic within the state itself. They could also be used in other states if another state requested under what is called an emergency management compact request. It's called the EMAC, where one state requests another state to assist them in an emergency. They may be used in a non-federalized status. They would also be trained and ready in the event that they needed to be mobilized for a Title X purpose. That's a potential, sir.
Why are they being trained for law enforcement?
Well, sir, historically, after the events of Kent State back in the 70s, the Army and its wanted to make sure that all National Guard personnel received training in domestic law enforcement and civil disturbance operations. And so that's been a longstanding requirement for military forces, Senator.
General, do you train the National Guard or urge them to train in law enforcement activities other than military police activities?
Senator, when they come to Title X status, we do not train them for law enforcement. We train them in the federal protection mission and with the standing rules for the use of force.
So the Secretary's order contradicts the current practice, which Title X personnel are not trained for law enforcement.
Sir, as I understand it, these National Guard members would be trained to do law enforcement activities if they are employed in their state active duty or in their Title 32 role, well knowing that if they're put in Title 10 role, that we would make it very clear that they are not allowed to execute any of those authorities, those activities that they've been trained to while they're conducting Title 10 missions.
Could you just clarify under Title 32, what role would a state governor have?
They would be under the state governor's control.
So
in Title 32 status, sir.
Title II. So you would have to have the permission of the state governor to deploy these quick reaction forces in a law enforcement capacity under Title 32.
Yes, sir. And by that distinction, I would not be deploying them. They would not be under my command and control.
Well, it's interesting that we now have a small group in the National Guard that are being trained not only in civil servants, but in law enforcement, that are being deployed, that will be able to deploy within 8 hours, some of them, with weapons. So you're telling me, though, Mr. Young, that the Secretary of Defense could not, or the President, could not deploy them in a law enforcement capacity unless the governor agreed. Is that correct?
Sir, no, that's not necessarily correct, right? The authority under which the president can mobilize National Guard personnel to be able to perform federal law enforcement functions and to enforce the law is technically 12406, which does not require the consent of the governor. One last piece, Senator, that may be helpful is that this training and this construct of having a readily mobilized and well-trained cadre of National Guard personnel who are well-trained with interacting with the civilian populace is nothing new. We did it in 2020 when we had 40,000 National Guard personnel in the streets all over the country. There was a similar quick reaction force. It was stood up. We used it essentially from July of 2020 through approximately January of 2021.
And that was for law
Thank you very much.
enforcement?
Senator, they were trained for law, is my understanding, but that's 5 years ago, and I
And that
don't
was-
have the documents
Thank
in
you,
front of me.
That
but
was
that's my-
and the cause of that deployment was what, Mr. Young? What prompted that deployment?
Well, Senator, I don't know that any of them were deployed. The need for them to be deployable was that there were protests going on around in every major city, and we had, at that time, 40,000 National Guard personnel deployed, and when they were deploying, it was federal officials were reticent to use active component troops, and they only wanted to use National Guard personnel who had military police training, and there's only so many of them. And so as a result, because we had 40,000 of them on the street, there was a need, Senator, to make sure that they had received
If I may,
additional forces.
if I may, I know where I'm going over time.
Ranking
Mr.
member,
Chairman.
I'd like to conclude that and recognize Senator Duckworth for one remaining questions